Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner, and I'm joined, as usual, by our Chief Political Correspondent, Byron York. Byron, I want to go straight to the battleground state of Pennsylvania, where both former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris have been this week holding town hall meetings. The first thing I want to do is just listen to a couple of questions. In fact, I believe they were the only two questions that were asked of Kamala Harris at her meeting, which included Liz Cheney and was held on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Let's listen to that.
My question is about maternal health. Specifically in the United States, maternal mortality is devastating. The rates are terrible. And I was wondering if you have a plan to combat the crisis.
How do you propose to help bridge this gap, making both child and elder care more affordable for hardworking families, and also retaining and attracting quality talent for these essential jobs?
So first of all, you're dealing with a lot.
So these seem to be pretty odd questions given the where this was taking place, or where it was supposedly taking place. There were 30 disaffected Republicans, as I understand it, on the stage. You would think that meant that this was about broadening the voter base. But these were questions, one on maternal mortality and the other on cost of elder care, which, though important and dealing with important matters, are not, I think, central to Republican or disaffected Republican concerns. So why were these scripted questions on those subjects? What was the Harris campaign trying to do?
Well, Harris and Liz Cheney being maybe the most prominent Republican supporter of Harris, but Liz Cheney is best known for pursuing Donald Trump through the January 6th committee. I'm talking at great length about the danger that she feels that Trump presents to American democracy. So there was a little bit of that in this, but you're right. It turns into kind of a softer women's issue kind of event. Now, Cheney and Harris did events on Monday, in that place we just saw, which was a suburb of Philadelphia. Then they went to Michigan, then they went to Wisconsin and did different events in each place. And the goal in Pennsylvania was to attract suburban women who might have misgivings, who might have voted Republican in the past, who might have misgivings about Donald Trump. And so the only two questions that were asked, this was not a really long event, it lasted 39 minutes, I think, the whole thing. The only two questions that were asked were the ones you just played. I should say, now the woman who had the second grader and a parent with dementia, obviously in a very difficult spot. And what Harris did was offer a lot of sympathy. So much sympathy that, in fact, you thought, is she ever going to answer the question in any way? And then her answer to the question was to have Medicare pay for in-home elder care, which would be a massively, just almost unimaginably expensive prospect. Harris just rolled it out on The View a week ago. And then the other one, the Gen Z student who was worried about maternal mortality, that was kind of a vehicle for Harris to talk about abortion. Because if there were any former Republicans in there and people who were pro-life, this was basically to give them permission to vote for Harris, who is very, very strongly pro-choice. We know that her running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, signed a law there that puts no limits at all, no time limits at all on abortion. This was a way to let her get into abortion by talking about the life of the mother, as it were.
Right. So, Byron, you touched in what you just said on the other issue that is being ramped up. There's abortion on the one hand, but there is also the Democrats are really playing up the threat that they suggest that Donald Trump poses to democracy, that he's a fascist, etc. Does that make their appeal primarily to their own base to stir people up, or are they really trying to broaden their base by persuading Republicans that, even though you're normally a Republican, you have to understand that this particular Republican is a threat to our democracy.
It is not about broadening the base. There's no doubt about that. But the campaign really, the Harris campaign has been in a couple of phases. The first phase was the introductory phase, the introduction of a sort of bare bones set of policy proposals that she can say, oh, I've promoted a $25,000 tax credit for people who are first-time home buyers, or $50,000 to start a small business, and an improved child credit, that kind of thing. Get that established. And then now she seems to have, in the last couple of weeks before the election, she seems to have moved strongly into the attack Trump phase. And there are some Democrats who don't believe she spent enough time introducing herself. I mean, there's an emptiness about her that's really striking. I think that people sense. I certainly sensed it at the town hall meeting, because there was a lot of sympathy before she got to one policy proposal, and that was pretty rare. So there is this emptiness, and so Democrats feel that she should, appeal more to people by telling them what she will do as president. But there is a part of the Democratic Party that feels you just have to if you haven't attacked Trump 10 times today, you're not doing enough. And the latest thing we've seen is an article in The Atlantic, and a lot of discussion on some cable TV shows about Trump expressing admiration for Hitler. Now, this has come out quite in the past before, and I think a lot of Republicans are just shrugging. Are they saying this Hitler? Are they doing this Hitler thing again?
Right.
The biggest reason for that is because Trump was president of the United States for 4 years.
Right.
They saw him be president. They saw him be commander-in-chief. They saw all this other stuff, and they did not see Hitler.
Right.
So there's a kind of a franticness about it right now, but that does seem to be 2 weeks out where the Democratic Party is.
It does seem to be frenetic. But let's turn our attention to another town hall. 18 hours earlier, former President Trump was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Shows how important Pennsylvania is to each of these two candidates. And you've described his event as being bigger, not just in the fact that there were more people, although there were many more people, but also in dealing with a wider range of issues. It wasn't two scripted questions allowing the candidate to talk very tightly about particular issues. They ranged. So what was going on here? What can we learn from the way in which Trump and his campaign had that town hall?
This was a town hall that was moderated by a woman named Sage Steele, who used to be an ESPN personality, left him, I think, in 2022 over some issues. She thought they were restricting her freedom of speech, and now does a podcast. Very personable type. And she and Trump acted pretty well. Basically, all of these have prepared questions. I mean, it's not as if they're going to invite some stranger into the street to give a totally unexpected question. So there were 6 people who asked questions, and they knew who they were in advance. So there's not a really big surprise element, but what you saw in this group, first of all, you saw it mixed pretty evenly between men and women. A lot more people without college degrees at the Trump event than there were at the Harris event. And the issues they were interested in, the economy, inflation, national security, the border, reflected more accurately, I thought, the issues that millions of polls have shown us that Americans are most concerned about in this race. So basically you saw an event that attracted a broader group of people, a more diverse, inclusive group of people, talking about a broader set of
issues. So I want to switch gears here and talk about the way that campaigns sometimes want to suggest they're in real trouble, and they raise money with those things, saying it's an emergency. Sometimes they want to express huge confidence and that they're just almost gliding to victory. And October has not been a good month for Vice President Harris. The polling has moved somewhat against her, but it's still very tight. And you have said that in going out and attending her rallies, there's enthusiasm and there's genuine support for her. I wanted to ask you about why campaigns sometimes want to express pessimism, sometimes optimism, and also specifically, Vivek Ramaswamy was on TV, and he just this week, and he expressed the view that Trump was going to win in a landslide. Is there a danger of overconfidence on the Trump side?
If you're saying he's going to win in a landslide, I think there is a danger of that. You said it pretty well. Certainly in fundraising appeals, you will see campaigns saying, oh, this is terrible, we're in trouble, they're so big, they're so strong, we're so rich, we won't have a chance unless you can send at least $10, and could you do it right now? Mm-hmm. So they do say that sort of thing. Now, there has been a growing confidence in the Trump campaign about their ability to win. They're feeling pretty good about Georgia. I should say the short version of how you win is, if you're Trump, is you win all the states that you won in 2020, and then you have to win Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. That's one way to do it. Now, he won North Carolina in 2020. If he lost North Carolina this time, that'd be a big problem for him. But they're feeling pretty confident in the southern tier of states, so that leaves winning one of the Rust Belt tier of states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin. They're feeling pretty good about that. Trump, on the other hand, is, I think, personally somewhat superstitious and does not come out and say this sort of stuff. And if you were to say to him, oh, can I be the first to call you Mr. President? He would say, no, no, no. Yeah. So I think it's a mixture of sort of utility in fundraising on one hand, and just trying to keep expectations in control on the other.
Just on expectations, is this sort of somewhat souring in October on Harris, or the weakening of her polls, is that to some extent responsible for that air of perhaps desperation and going around to Hitler and fascism and all of those things? Or was that just going to happen anyway?
Personally, I think this is what normally happens in a campaign, but in this case on a really truncated schedule. Because we all thought when Joe Biden pulled out on July 21st, we thought, wow, this is going to be a quick campaign. And that Kamala Harris did not have any of the benefits of having been in a long primary process, because candidates get better during the primaries. They hone their positions, they hone their voter appeals, they get better just dealing with people. They get better at all of that stuff, like most people who are pretty smart do if they do something every single day. She didn't have any of that. So I think what you're seeing now is the public is seeing more about her, and they're reacting in maybe kind of a blah sort of way.
Right.
And because it's not like she went up like this and is just crashing back down. It's just like she went up like this and it's just kind of stalled.
Right.
She's stalled out. And so we'll see if that continues for a couple of weeks and Trump strengthens a bit, well, he'll win. But it's still a very, very winnable race for her.
Right, right. Well, you say a couple of weeks, 20 million people about have already voted.
They have.
And, we're not, an election day is less than 2 weeks away. We'll be back again next week. Byron, thanks very much for joining us. And thank you all for joining us on Political Perspectives.